the end, after the funeral, all they found in his cabin was this: a jar of birds he couldn't set free. 40 years ago, a family played a cruel joke. They sent their unwanted daughter to the recluse on the mountain, the man they all whispered about. They called her the ugly one. They sent her as a prank. The letter they discovered in his coat pocket, addressed to that same family, was dated the day he died. It began, "To those who gave me a treasure and called it trash, this is not a ghost story. It's the story of what he saw in her that no one else did, and why, for 4 decades, he never told a soul the truth about their life together, or about the night she saved him from himself." The valley below Black Spruce Mountain knew 2 things about Elias Thorne. First, that he lived up there, alone in the old forester's cabin, for longer than anyone could remember. And second, that something tragic had sent him there. A shadow from the war, some said. A lost love, whispered others. He came down only once a month for supplies, a silent, towering figure with eyes the color of the winter sky, paying for his goods with meticulously whittled toys or bundles of rare, dried herbs. Jim Miller, the brother, remembered the day they first spoke of Elias. It was over a failing farm and a desperate, cruel idea. Their father was ill. Debts clung to the land like mildew. And there was Alara, his sister. Jim, younger then, replied, "So? He's a hermit. He'd probably shoot us for trespassing." Their mother, with pinched lips, said, "We need a solution, Jim. The bank won't wait." And Alara, well, her prospects aren't improving. The unspoken words hung in the air, thicker than the steam from the sink. Alara's shoulders tightened, but she didn't turn. Her brother, Fred, snorted a laugh. "Maybe we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We send her up there. Tell Thorne it's a goodwill gesture. Help him keep house. A joke. If he sends her back, we're no worse off. If he's desperate enough to keep her." He let the sentence hang. The cruelty was so casual it was chilling. The father looked at Alara's back, then out the window at the looming mountain. A transaction. A joke. A way to offload a problem. He gave a single, slow nod. "Pack her a bag." Alara didn't cry. The tears had been spent years ago, in the hidden corners of the barn loft. This was just the final confirmation of what she'd always known. She was a burden, an aesthetic flaw in the family portrait. The mountain at least promised silence, maybe even a kind of freedom. As the old truck bumped up the treacherous logging road the next morning, she didn't look back at the farmhouse. She watched the pines grow taller, the air grow sharper, and held her small case in her lap like a shield. The truck stopped in a clearing. The cabin was small, sturdy, but shrouded in shadows. Elias Thorne stood on the porch not as an old man, but in his late 40s, a powerful bearded figure still as a tree. He didn't approach. Jim got out, nervous. "Mr. Thorne, brought you something. My sister, Alara, thought you could use the company. Help around the place." Elias said nothing. His gaze moved past Jim and settled on Alara, who was climbing out of the truck, her eyes on the ground. The silence stretched. A jay screamed in the trees. Jim nervously continued, "We'll just leave her things here then. She's a good worker. Quiet." Jim practically threw her bag onto the gravel path, jumped back into the truck, and reversed in a spray of stones. Alara was left standing there, utterly alone, with this silent giant 20 yards away. She forced herself to look up, and when her eyes met his, she saw something she didn't expect. Not disgust, not mockery, not pity. She saw a reflection, a deep, familiar loneliness, and something else, a sharp, intelligent curiosity. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then, his voice, unused and gravelly, like stones turning in a creek bed, broke the silence. "Did they tell you why they sent you?" Alara was shocked by the directness. She swallowed. "The farm is failing. I am expendable." A faint, almost imperceptible flicker in his steely eyes. He nodded slowly, as if she'd confirmed a theory. "Expendable." He repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. My name is Elias. The cabin is there. The woods are yours. Do as you please. If you stay, you work for yourself, not for me." He turned and walked back to the porch, picking up a half-carved piece of wood and a knife. The conversation, it seemed, the first days were a delicate, wordless dance. Alara, expecting orders or derision, found only space. Elias provided it. He left food for her to prepare if she wished. He showed her, by silently doing it himself, where the fresh spring was. He once pointed to a patch of dark, loamy earth and simply said, "Good for potatoes." It was the longest sentence he'd uttered in days. For Alara, who had lived under a constant barrage of criticism and disappointed sighs, this silence wasn't hostile. It was peaceful. It was permission to simply be. She began to notice things. The way he could sit for hours, watching a hawk circle, his hands always moving, shaping wood into lifelike forms. She saw the care with which he tended 2 beehives behind the cabin. His massive hands gentle and steady amidst the buzzing swarm. The rain played a soft rhythm on the tin roof. Alara, emboldened by the cozy isolation, spoke without thinking. "You carve birds, but you never paint them." His knife paused. He looked at the sparrow taking shape in his palm. Color is fleeting. The shape is the truth. The grain of the wood, that's its story. Paint would hide that. Alara looked at her sketch, at the careful lines capturing the gills of the mushroom. "I see," she said softly. It was the first real understanding between them. She saw past the gruff exterior to the philosopher-woodsman within. He, in turn, saw a woman who didn't fill silence with noise, but who observed, who sought the truth of things. Elias, without looking up, said, "Your family, they see the paint, not the grain." The statement was so profound, so accurately targeted, that Alara felt her breath catch. For the first time, someone had named her reality. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her birthmark. She didn't wipe it away. Elias saw it. He didn't offer comfort. He simply returned to his carving, but his movements were slower, softer. The space between them on that porch was no longer empty. It was filled with a shared, unspoken recognition. The trust grew, syllable by syllable over weeks. One evening, as a blizzard sealed them in, Elias told her his truth. He was not born a hermit. He was once a promising woodworker and a soldier. He had a love, Clara, whose laughter was, to him, the sound of light itself. He went to war, leaving her with a promise and a carved lark. The war took more than years. It took his voice for anything frivolous, and scarred his soul with visions he could never articulate. He returned, a stranger to his own life, only to find a second telegram waiting. Influenza. Clara was gone. The world of people, with its clatter and false cheer, became unbearable. Their pity was a cage. Their noise was an assault. So he took his grief and his tools, and he walked into the mountains, seeking a silence that matched the one inside him. The carved birds, he explained, were prayers he couldn't say, souls he couldn't save, including his own. He finished, the firelight etching the deep lines of his pain. Alara didn't. Spring melted into summer. Their coexistence evolved into a partnership. Alara, with her keen eye and book knowledge, revived the garden into a burst of medicinal herbs and vegetables. She learned the bees, harvesting honey with a calm Elias admired. He, in turn, built her a proper writing desk by the window that caught the morning light. He showed her how to read the forest, the meaning of different barks, the tracks of animals, the edible plants hiding in the understory. They spoke of books, of the philosophies of solitude versus loneliness, of the intricate politics of a beehive. He called her Alara, never girl or woman. She called him Elias. The birthmark, the drifted eye, these were simply parts of the landscape of her face, as accepted as the scar on his forearm or the particular knot in the old pine by the creek. One afternoon, she was struggling to fix a leaking roof bucket. Elias watched her determined failure for 10 minutes before walking over. Without a word, he took the tools from her hands, his own enveloping hers for a brief, electric moment. He fixed the seal in 3 efficient movements, then handed the tools back. Their eyes locked. No words were needed. The space between them had not just been filled, it had been bridged. The garden was a tapestry of green and color. The cabin walls were adorned with delicate pressed flowers in frames Alara had made. The smell of baking bread and wood smoke hung in the air. Alara emerged, not in a drab dress, but in a simple, clean shirt and trousers, her hair in a loose braid. She stood straight. Her face, touched by the sun, held a calm confidence Jim had never seen. Elias appeared behind her, a protective, silent presence. Jim stuttered out his excuse for visiting, checking in father's health. His eyes darted around, taking in the peace. He saw the way Elias subtly placed a cup of tea near Alara, the way her hand briefly rested on his arm as she passed. There was no mockery here, no joke, only a profound, quiet contentment that shamed him. He left with mumbled pleasantries, his cruel errand crumbling to dust. As he drove away, he glanced in the mirror. They were already turning back to their world, walking side by side towards the garden, their shoulders almost touching. He knew with a sickening certainty that they had not pawned off a burden. They had given away a treasure. The worst blizzard in 50 years screamed against the cabin. Elias was burning up, lost in the trenches of his mind. He called for Clara, for fallen comrades, his voice a ragged scream of terror. The mighty mountain man was reduced to a trembling child by memories. Alara didn't flinch. She didn't try to shake him awake. She wrapped blankets around his shivering form. She sat on the floor beside him and she began to talk. Not about the war, but about the mountain. She described the exact green of the new ferns in April, the sound of the creek swollen with meltwater, the precise pattern of stars over the ridge on a frosty night, the weight of a honeycomb fresh from the hive. She described the texture of the wood he carved, the smell of cedar shavings, the feel of his hand, steady and sure, guiding hers to plant a seed. She painted with her words the life they had built, stone by stone, seed by seed, moment by quiet moment. Slowly, her voice, calm and unwavering, became an anchor in his storm. His shouts subsided into whimpers, then into silence. His eyes, clouded with fever and fear, focused on her face. He didn't see Clara. He saw Alara. Her unfortunate face, illuminated by the firelight, was the most beautiful, the most Alara, you are here. I have always been here, Elias, and I always will be. That night, the last wall around his heart crumbled, not with a dramatic explosion, but with the gentle, relentless persistence of a root-breaking stone. They never had children of the flesh, but they nurtured a world. The forest was their family. The creatures, both wild and tame, were their dependents. They lived not in grand passion, but in profound devotion. A touch of hands when passing, a finished sentence for the other, a shared blanket on a cold night. Alara's hair turned silver, her face a map of smile lines that radiated from her eyes. Elias's back bowed slightly, but his hands remained steady at the whittling block. The ugly daughter had become the heart of a mountain kingdom. The broken hermit had become a man whole again, not despite his scars, but with them woven into a new tapestry of peace. Alara went first as gently as she had lived. A final sigh, a slight squeeze of his hand, and she was gone. Elias did not cry out. He sat with her for hours, stroking her hair. He carved one final bird, a lark for Clara, but also for Alara, the woman who taught a different bird to sing again in his soul. He placed it in her still hands. Then he began to write the letter, the one they would find in his pocket. The cabin was spotless, orderly, a life concluded with intention. And then Jim saw the jar, glowing in the morning light. Hundreds of birds, each a masterpiece. And the letter, addressed to the Miller family. With trembling hands, he read it aloud to his brother, their own faces now lined with regret and time. The words of the letter were these: "To those who gave me a treasure and called it trash, you sent me a Lara as a jest, a way to clear a debt and a burden. For that, I must thank you. You gave me the key to my own prison. You saw a flaw in the canvas. I saw the artist's hand. You saw a quiet nature as weakness. I found in it a strength that held up my crumbling world. You saw a woman to be managed. I found a partner who built a life with me, stone by patient stone. She was not ugly. She was the quiet dawn after a lifetime of night. She was the honey that sweetened a bitter life. Her flaw was the unique brushstroke that made her masterpiece a face I loved above all others. The birds in the jar are not mine. They are ours. Each one is a day she made beautiful, a fear she quieted, a laugh we shared. I leave them to you, not as an inheritance, but as a question. What else have you thrown away because you could not see its true grain? We wanted for nothing. We loved and were loved completely." Signed, Elias Thorne, a grateful man. The joke had been on them all along. They had measured worth in aesthetics and social currency, and in doing so had bankrupted their own souls. Elias and Alara, measured by the world's cruel tape, had nothing. Yet, they had possessed everything. A kingdom of two, built on the unshakable foundations of seeing and being seen. The mountain